I have a question. Could I ask you to get me a white wine? White. Thank you. Thank you. Oh man, she's amazing. All right. When you have friends in high places. So yeah, this is the last hallway track of Perf Now. It's been a fun experiment. I didn't think people would vibe this well to it because it's like, who's a stranger who wants to talk to me, whatever, live, yo, GDPR, because we're in Europe, right? But it's been fun. So to start the last edition, this is someone I've had in mind about this the whole time. And you know how I do it is I basically ask my guests to introduce themselves, talk about who they are, what they do, where they work, or whatever order, and we start from there.
All right. Well, I'll kick it off. My name is Jeremy Wagner.
Yeah.
I am currently...
Bring the mic a little closer. Perfect.
Sorry. My name is Jeremy Wagner.
Yeah.
I am currently a technical writer for Google Chrome in DevRel.
Yep.
And basically, over the last year, well, ever since I joined Google a couple of years ago now, it's been all like web perf stuff, especially Core Web Vitals.
Yeah.
But a big chunk of that time has been me just crafting. Look at me. I'm like an artisan, apparently, of documents. It's just me and with a bunch of other people writing a lot of documentation on INP. So I get a lot of technical review from people on the team, like great people like Michael Mockney, Barry Pollard, Annie Sullivan, people's names you probably have heard a lot in the web performance community.
Yeah.
But we all get together and we have just been really working on great documentation for INP, and we are not done with that documentation yet. So
amazing. And yes, you're not done,
you're never done.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I try to remind people all the time that when say like Core Vitals were introduced and people are like, what's going on here, whatever,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. But for every little sort of like little bit of groveling they were doing, I'm like, listen, folks, things progress, things, data comes down,
Yep.
things change, and, we're going to see maturation of metrics at some point. And, we're seeing that right now.
Absolutely. And we saw it from the jump from FID to IMP.
Yep.
FID has gotten a little bit of grief in the last few years, or at least since it was introduced. And what I can say is that it was the right metric for the time.
Yes.
It was imperfect, and it wasn't holistic.
Yes.
And with IMP, we're just taking a different direction. We're saying, you know what? We're not a different direction. We're expanding on, like, we're going further in the direction that we are. And we're saying, you know what? It's not just the first interaction and only its input delay. It's the entire response, like the quantifying the responsiveness of the page throughout the entire life cycle of the page.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of work there. And I can understand that developers might feel a little bit inundated because a lot of origins are passing FID. I believe last month, as Tim Kadlik said, 94% of origins in Crux are passing FID on mobile, but that number is like closer to between 63 and 66%
on IMP.
On IMP. So yeah, it's a little scary, but the result is going to be that the web is going to be a much better place to use as people and developers start to improve on this metric.
Exactly. And, it's funny because in my presentations, I've been describing FID as the following. I'll pull the room. I'm like, are there any teachers here, former teachers? And I've always said, like, as a teacher, you might look at some test results from your class and you'll see everyone gets like 98%. And you're thinking, okay, either everyone cheated or this test was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've always looked at it.
Absolutely.
It's like Google realized that they didn't go in the depth that they needed to get the response that they were looking for in terms of like measurements and whatnot. And thus INP came about.
Yep. And you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And as Tim Kadlik said in his closing keynote, imperfect data is better than no data.
Absolutely.
And he likened it to sort of being like if they turn off the lights in the venue and they just give you a flashlight with dying batteries.
Yeah.
You still have a light source. It's probably insufficient, but you still have a way to kind of work around. And INP is just like replacing the batteries and making this a much easier. Well, it's much easier to surface these problems that have always been there, but just weren't visible.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's very important. And I think, again, I remind people there are measurements in a lot of things that we do, and we probably just don't realize it, and there are a lot of imperfect measurements in a lot of things that we do. And sometimes we have the opportunity and the chance to realize that they're imperfect and make the changes. And again, that's what we're seeing right now. Yeah, man. I mean, I I see it and I don't understand it. It is how sort of like measurements work.
Yeah.
Like you see things, you're like, okay, something's off here. Okay, we can make this better by doing this, and we move forward.
Yep.
One thing that I want to talk to you about
Sure.
is, describe in your own words as a prolific writer. By the way, this gentleman is responsible for several books out there, notably.
My first book was Web Performance in Action with Manning. Then I wrote an ebook for Smashing Magazine about the WebP image format, which is still relevant to this day,
absolutely.
in my opinion. And then in 2021, just before I joined Google, I finished and released Responsible JavaScript through a book apart.
Boom.
And I actually went through that book a while ago. And I know it's just me. I wrote the book, but I still think that some of it still holds up for sure. And I think the overall narrative still makes sense. It might not mention the things that we're thinking about today, such as INP.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe second edition. I hope.
Let's go. But again, delivering, kudos. And again, we are speaking with someone who has had an extensive, opportunity to write very detailed documentation. So I'd like to ask you, how important is documentation overall?
I think, well, we have a member of our team, Joe Medley.
Yes. Oh man, say hi to Joe.
Yeah, Joe's a great guy. And one thing that he does, that he says, it's actually in the signature of his email at Google. It says, if an API is not documented, it does not exist.
Boom.
And while I don't necessarily write solely about APIs, if we don't document the metrics, if we don't document the best practices, then they might as well not exist. Like, you may be able to figure out some of the best practices intuitively on your own, but if those metrics aren't documented or minimally documented and they're not explained in detail, then it's very difficult, especially for metrics such as INP, for people to understand it. And actually, there are a lot of opportunities to improve on the INP metric documentation.
Yep.
And I think we're going to be looking at. I'm kind of spitballing this idea that I might be rewriting the INP metric doc early next year to make it more visual, to try to explain concepts in a way that are much simpler, because it is a complex metric, but there is a better way to explain it. But it's what we have now, and it's what we got to work with. But documentation is vital to understanding anything. For example, if you picked up a framework, like say if you picked up React and you had no idea what JSX was and there was no documentation on that, we wouldn't be talking about React today.
Right.
You have to read about something to learn about it.
Right. Absolutely. And you know what? I can't, imagine a more perfect segue to talk about documentation and to understand things and to read about them. Let's talk about the performance, the learned performance documentation that just recently, if I'm not mistaken, went live.
We just dropped it on November 1st, and I'm actually looking around to see if Kevin is around, but I don't see him.
He walked by, but I had him on camera earlier today.
Damn. So the reason I bring his name up is, yes, we released that. It's currently 13 modules, although one of them is sort of a welcome module. So it's like 12 core modules of content. It's an MVP of what we plan to. We plan to really add some extra stuff on this to fill in some of the gaps that we know are there. But it is available on web.dev. So it's web.dev/learn/performance. Or you can just go to web.dev, click the learn link in the menu, and then you can go from there. But Kevin has written 10 of the modules that were in the course. And we really focused on trying to make this a resource that beginners can get to. So if you're a web performance pro, there might be some content that's coming down the pipe that might be more applicable to you. And you might not be too crazy about what's out there. But if you're like really just kind of starting to get your feet wet with this thing, and you want to, like, what do I have to learn about performance? What are all the aspects? I think, and I'm biased, but I do think that this is a good starting point, and you will learn something, which is better than learning nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely. And you know what? I love the idea, because in the last couple of years when I was at Catchpoint and Webpage Test with Tim and Stoyan, if he's around somewhere, you know, I was very adamant on the idea of literacy,
Yes.
because web performance, the web looks entirely different when you understand web performance.
It does.
Like every interaction you make or you see, you can look at it in a web performance perspective.
It can cross boundaries.
Oh, give me a quick second. Hold up.
Yeah.
My man, good to see you. I'm happy we got to speak. Shout out to Stu, my man. He's taking off. Yeah. All right. Let's stay in touch and get the leg better, please. Oh, yay. There we go. 303. Let's go.
That looks like
absolutely,
a pedal.
Sorry about that.
I was about to say, yeah, and when you know about web performance, it actually starts. Funny enough, you not only do you start to notice when there are problems, even if you don't have dev tools open and you're not, like trying to troubleshoot, you will start to comment to the people around you.
Yeah.
And my wife gets very annoyed by this when she's on her older MacBook and she clicks on something and it takes a while, and I'm like, oh, the interaction latency and the delay on this is taking a long time. I think it's taking a long time to paint. And she's like, what the hell are you talking about? But you can't help yourself. But that's the great thing about this community is that we are laser focused on this problem. And without that literacy, you don't really get there. You don't really start to think about it critically.
100%. And again, I remember doing my research, coming up, learning, and just now looking at the web so much differently. It's like, it's like anything. You might be an amazing car mechanic, and then you'll see someone start the car, or you might hear someone start the car. You're like, ooh, that sounds like their is not working right.
Yeah. Oh, it was funny because I noticed. Yeah, exactly. Like a good analogy is I started noticing on my car at home that it's idling a bit lower.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think there is an engine air filter that needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
And I go into the mechanic. It's something I could do myself, but I don't always have time. Yeah. I go into the mechanic. They go, yeah, your engine air filter needs to be replaced. I'm like, that's why. Right.
Yeah.
And like but that's like a diagnostic. Yeah. Right. And when it comes to metrics, we often say that RUM data without attribution sometimes is like you see a check engine light.
Yeah.
I know there's a problem. My INP is not great or whatever, but I don't know exactly what it is. And Tim Cadlick, and I know I've been really paying lip service, well, not, to be dismissive. I mean, I'm paying tribute to Tim Cadlick because he talks about the importance of attribution. And what we're starting to see now in RUM providers is we're getting that attribution where we can say, oh, it's that CSS selector to this element that caused this problem.
Yes.
But there still are some dark areas. And like what we're looking at, like there are things that are transient. You could have ambient processing conditions that create main thread contention in a way. If you have like 100 tabs open and they're all doing a bunch of stuff, that one page that you see in your RUM data looks slow, but you're like, well, what happened in this particular 95th percentile case? It's kind of weird. There's still a lot of uncharted territory. Just to say that. So
and the uncharted territory that could be temporary because like 3 years ago, some of the data that we're looking at now was uncharted territory.
Right.
And I just love the idea now that we're able to like look at metrics within metrics almost. We're like, that's how far deep down we're going in to make sure that we can understand, we can diagnose an issue within like what we feel is a problematic resource. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like if you ever heard of the concept of a TNO map. So it's like these really old Middle Age maps from the Middle, actually earlier than the Middle Ages, where literally it is an O, and inside of it there's like a T.
Okay.
And then the top was Europe, bottom left was Africa, and the bottom right was Asia. But that was it. It literally was so coarse, and it didn't really explain the landscape. And over time, you start to see like approximations of what the world looks like, but it doesn't quite look like the world as we understand it. It has like weird names for things like Occidentalis for the West. But then like now we're in the current age where we have mapped pretty much every bit of the surface of the earth.
Yeah.
And I don't know where we're at in the stage. I feel like we're somewhere in between that map that has a lot of, it's high-ish fidelity, but it's not quite satellite imagery when it comes to metrics. And we're getting there. And I suspect it's going to take a long time before we get that resolution that we want. So
that's a good analogy. I like that. If someone wanted to get in touch with Jeremy Wagner,
Sure.
how would they do it?
So I have a website. Oh, websites.
Yeah. Okay.
So my website is jlwagner.net. It's
Okay.
my personal blog.
Yeah.
I don't use it for much, but there is a nifty little contact form if you just go to that page, jlwagner.net, and click on the contact link. It's in the main menu. You will find a little form, and that form goes straight to my work email. So if you have a burning performance question, I try to get back to everybody. If you contact me and I don't get back to you within a week or something like that, ping me again. I want to talk to developers, and I want to try to do everything I can to talk to them. And like, if I can't answer your question, then maybe I know somebody who can answer your question, or I can talk to them and get the answer back to you. But in any case, yeah, jlwagner.net. Go to the contact page, and that's how you can find me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, yo, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank
man.
you very much, man. It's always good to see you on here.
Oh, likewise. And you know what? I do have news for you that, I know you've been busy. I've been a little caught up, but there's some stuff that I think you're going to be very interested in that I definitely want to share with you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So thanks for stopping by the Hallway Track. That was Jeremy Wagner, folks.